Hello and welcome back to our channel. In this video, I will be talking about attention, memory, and their pathology. So, what is attention? Our five sensory organs are constantly receiving information from the environment. To analyze all this information more efficiently, our brains have developed the ability to prioritize, select, and focus only on information that is relevant to achieving a current goal. This ability is called attention. Importantly, attention is not only selecting relevant information, but also actively blocking and filtering out all irrelevant information. For example, let's imagine you have an exam tomorrow. You decided to prepare and started reading. The information that you are receiving from the book is relevant for achieving your goal to pass the exam, whereas all other information that may enter your mind is irrelevant. For example, you may suddenly remember that you must visit your doctor, or loud noises from outside may distract you from reading. In such cases, attention will try to block irrelevant signals and bring your focus back on the book. This is an energy-consuming process that is difficult to maintain for a long time. Eventually, at some point, your attention will be depleted and you will have to take a rest. Another important feature of attention is that it is flexible. You may have several competing goals, and their priorities may change. Sometimes it is necessary to shift your attention from one task to another. For example, imagine you were preparing for the exam, but then smelled that something was burning. In this case, the goal of being safe will override the goal of passing the exam, and making sure there is no fire in your house becomes more important. That is why the focus of your attention will shift away from reading to scanning your environment. In summary, remember that depending on a specific goal, all information that enters your brain can be divided into relevant and irrelevant for achieving that goal. Attention is the ability to focus only on relevant while blocking irrelevant information. However, also remember that the relevance of information may change when your goals change, so the focus of attention will also shift following the goals. Therefore, when you find it difficult to focus on some activity, maybe it is because that activity is not relevant to your main goals. Now let's look at the pathology of attention. Pathology of attention includes two types of symptoms: impaired ability to initiate or maintain focus, and symptoms of impaired ability to shift attention from one task to another. Here is a brief description of these symptoms. The first one is called apraxia, which is characterized by a general inability to focus attention on any information regardless of its relevance. This symptom is usually observed when there is a reduced activation of the central nervous system. It may happen due to intoxication with sedative substances like alcohol or drugs after head injury or in severe dementia. The next one is called hypermetamorphosis of attention. In this symptom, there is an impaired ability to discriminate between relevant and irrelevant signals. A person pays attention to every detail and every new stimulus. This symptom is usually observed in conditions characterized by hyperactivation of the central nervous system, for example in manic disorder, intoxication with psychostimulants, and sometimes at the initial phases of psychosis. The next symptom is pathological distractibility. In this case, people can discriminate between relevant and irrelevant signals, but have difficulties with voluntary initiation of focusing only on relevant signals. They cannot start blocking irrelevant signals. It is usually observed in people with ADHD, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. Another symptom is called exhaustibility of attention. In this case, patients can voluntarily focus on relevant information, but their attention quickly runs out. This symptom is also characteristic of patients with ADHD, but can also develop as a result of burnout, lack of sleep, and cognitive overexertion. It can also be found in patients recovering from a head injury or other severe somatic diseases. Finally, the last symptom is called rigid attention. In this symptom, there is an impaired ability to swiftly change the focus of attention between different tasks. It can be observed in patients with epilepsy, after traumatic brain injury, and in dementias. That is all that I wanted to say today about attention. We will come back to this topic when we discuss ADHD, the incidence of which has greatly increased in recent years. But now, let's move on to the next topic, which is memory. Memory is usually defined as the process of encoding, storing, and retrieving information. With regards to the period of time during which information is being stored, there is short-term memory that lasts for 20-30 seconds or less, and long-term memory that can store information for the rest of your life. There is also a concept of working memory, which is similar to short-term memory, but the distinction is that in working memory, the information is not only held but also manipulated by the mind, whereas in short-term memory, it is only stored. Depending on the type of information that is stored, memories can be visual, auditory, motor, and so on. Also, there is autobiographical or episodic memory, which is a memory of a specific personal experience, and semantic memory, which is a memory of general facts, concepts, or ideas. Formation of memories consists of several steps: encoding, retention, consolidation, and retrieval. With each step, the memory of specific information becomes stronger and stronger, and the key to transitioning from one step to another is repetition. For example, if you are trying to learn a poem, you must repeat it over and over until you can reproduce it without a mistake. Repetition of information can happen passively or subconsciously, without you being aware of it. Interestingly, it happens during wakeful rest and sleep. It has been scientifically proven that lack of rest and sleep interferes with memory consolidation. In experiments on mice, researchers would put two groups of mice in the same maze with a task to learn a route to a reward. The first group of mice was allowed to rest after finding the reward and to sleep without interruption on the night following the training. In another group, the rest and sleep of animals were interrupted. The next day, they would put the mice in the same maze and see how quickly they find the reward. The quicker a mouse finds the reward, the better it has memorized spatial information. Researchers noticed that mice from the second group performed significantly poorer. Why is this happening? It turns out that during wakeful rest and sleep after the initial learning phase, the neurons that were involved in the encoding phase replay information that is relevant for finding the reward and erase irrelevant information, thereby consolidating the memory. So next time you want to learn something new, make sure you have enough rest and sleep after the learning. It is important not to consume irrelevant information during the rest, for example, by scrolling social media, because it will contaminate relevant information and take a longer time to erase irrelevant information. Now, with regard to the pathology of memory, memory impairments can be divided into two groups: quantitative and qualitative impairments. The main quantitative symptom is amnesia. Amnesia means loss of memory about specific events or facts. It usually occurs in neurological diseases such as stroke, dementia, or head injury. Imagine that you have suffered a brain injury. If after the injury you do not remember events that preceded the injury, it is called retrograde amnesia. If you do not remember events that followed the injury, it is called anterograde amnesia. Qualitative symptoms are called paramnesia. For example, if after the brain injury, one does not remember actual events that happened before the injury and fills this gap with fictitious events, that is called confabulation. If they fill the gap with events that actually happened, but at different points in the past, it is called pseudo-reminiscence. If the patient fills the gap with events that actually had happened, but not to him, but maybe to his friends or relatives, this is called cryptomnesia. Again, amnesia and paramnesia are more common in severe neurological disorders. People with less severe disorders, such as depression or anxiety, show more subtle impairments. Multiple studies have shown that people with emotional disorders have problems with episodic memory. Episodic memory is a memory of a unique single event in one's life. The main feature of episodic memories is that they contain additional details, such as where and when that unique event occurred. For example, imagine that you were bitten by a dog. Normally, the memory of this negative event would also contain additional details about time and location. This is important from a biological perspective because remembering such additional information allows you to avoid this specific place in the future. Not only that, but remembering additional information also restrains fear and binds it to a specific location or time. So if you were bitten by a dog, normally you should fear a specific dog that lives in a specific place. However, in people with anxiety and depression, episodic memories lack this additional information. That is why they tend to generalize negative events. So, for example, if a person with weak episodic memory gets bitten by a dog, instead of fearing a specific dog that lives in a specific place, they will fear all dogs in general. We will come back to episodic memory impairment and its role in emotional disorders in our future videos when we speak about anxiety and depression in more detail. In summary, remember that attention consists of two parallel processes: the selection of relevant information and the active suppression of irrelevant information. That is an energy-consuming process, and attention has limits. So, to keep your attention for longer, try to minimize distractors. Switch off your phone, focus on one task at a time, and take a rest periodically. Switching from reading a book to processing other information on YouTube or Instagram is not a rest. When resting after learning, try not to consume any irrelevant information. This will help you not only to recharge your attention, but also to consolidate information that you have learned. Wakeful rest and proper sleep are prerequisites for good memory consolidation. And that's it about memory and attention. Thanks for watching, and see you soon.